Joe diGenova, legal analyst and former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Always good to talk to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, sir. All right, a lot to get to. I'll get Friday's news in a second, but I want to first start where we were just a moment ago, which is on this idea. The former Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, has been tapped to be the next Attorney General by President Trump. Are you happy with the pick of Bill Barr?
Delighted. Superb individual. He was a fantastic Attorney General when he was there during President Bush, the father, his term. He is a superb lawyer, been the general counsel for Verizon, been in private practice with a large law firm. Couldn't pick anybody better. Really a sensational choice by the president.
Seems like a stable pick. And one of the questions I have is whoever ends up coming in here, can they root out the partisan nature of some of the Justice Department's activities? Is Bill Barr the type of guy who's going to come in there and shake things up?
Well, I think what he's going to do is be a realist about what the place needs. He's not a wrecking ball kind of guy. Bill's a very, very serious lawyer. I expect him to do his job. I expect him to hold people accountable. I expect him to make sure that the department is insulated from political considerations for prosecutions in civil cases, which it was not during the Obama administration. The place was a hotbed of partisan political activity. So I expect him to act in the way it should act, restoring the rule of law so that it applies to Republicans and Democrats alike. We have strayed very far from the rule of law under the Obama administration, and he will restore it. Unfortunately, Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein were unable to do that, either by their leadership style or by their substantive decisions.
Another question, Joe, and this is Hans von Spakovsky. Do you think that he's actually going to start, if he gets confirmed, actually supervising the special counsel the way the Attorney General's office is supposed to under the regulations that govern the appointment of special counsels?
Well, I expect him to do exactly what the regulations permit and authorize, and the answer to your question is yes. And it is very clear that Rod Rosenstein never had any intention of supervising Bob Mueller because it was a counterintelligence investigation which Rosenstein authorized, which is not authorized by the special counsel regulations. I think one of the things Mueller will do is replace Rod Rosenstein as quickly as possible with a qualified person, not someone who's interested in being part of a soft coup d'etat. So I think he'll start internally, and he'll deal with Mueller as it is required.
All right, so we got new information on Friday about a number of things, but I want to focus on the one that everyone seems to think is going to take down the President of the United States in the media, which is Michael Cohen's sentencing report. This comes out Friday and indicates that, he lied, he's a big liar, he was in the process of facilitating payments on behalf of a person who we don't know who it is, but it's quite obviously Donald Trump, to pay off women during the campaign, and therefore this is a massive campaign finance violation. What do you make of all of that?
Well, first of all, those pleadings were a violation of DOJ policy. Second of all, whatever they're accusing the president of, from my viewpoint, is not a crime. The former chairman of the Federal Election Commission has stated that these types of hush money payments are perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with them. They were paid with private funds. They were paid by the candidate himself through the auspices of a lawyer. He relied on legal advice. There's no way you can indict President Trump for anything that occurred. And now that doesn't mean that the Southern District of New York won't recommend that and might even try to create a constitutional crisis by indicting him before he leaves office, but putting it under seal and saying that they're doing that in order to ensure accountability. The Southern District has laid out in its pleadings some conduct which, as I said, is not criminal, but which they have labeled criminal in order to set up facts for impeachment against the President of the United States. So I think that's a pretty heavy hand in New York, and I don't think it's going to sit well with the new Attorney General, but we'll see.
Yeah, Joe, I reading, as a former DOJ guy, reading that sentencing report, I was really struck by how it didn't read like a sentencing report. It read like a almost partisan political diatribe against the president.
Well, it was pretty pretty partisan. I don't think there's any doubt that the folks in the Southern District don't like Donald Trump. They're perfectly free to not like the President of the United States, but they're not allowed to put it in their pleadings. I think the pleadings in New York went beyond the pale. I think they violated DOJ policy. No one, however, as long as Rod Rosenstein is there, is going to hold them accountable for that. And so I think it's pretty clear what the Southern District is doing. They know they can't indict the President of the United States. They know they can't indict him and keep it under seal until he leaves office. They're trying to help the Democrats in the House with write an article of impeachment. That's what that was about. It's an improper use of governmental authority, but they will not be held accountable for it.
Well, we notice now that the Democrats and the media, their best opportunity to go after the president has nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion. It has to do with Stormy Daniels, of all things, and this idea that she's getting paid off, that Karen McDougal, this playmate, got paid off during the election time, being used as a way to say, hey, he had a campaign finance violation. Joe, we've seen this before. John Edwards went through this. He used campaign donor funds to pay Riel Hunter, and a jury said, hey, there's no problem here.
Yeah, well, first of all, he used campaign funds. President Trump paid hush money to women with whom he allegedly had relationships to keep them quiet so as not to embarrass him and ruin his business. It may have also affected the campaign. But he used personal funds. That's perfectly proper. And John, former Senator Edwards, used campaign funds and used a donor as a pay-through scheme. Nothing of the sort happened here. This is a direct payment, perfectly proper. By the way, President Obama got millions of dollars in illegal campaign contributions, and he was given a several $100,000 fine as a civil penalty. There was not even a suggestion that he would be prosecuted criminally. So there's clearly, again, a double standard. If you're a Democrat, you can violate the law with impunity. If you're a Republican, if you sneeze, you get indicted.
That's amazing. The Obama Justice Department worked for Obama. The Trump administration's Justice Department works for Obama. It's nuts how that works. All right, more with Joe diGenova in a second, including on the James Comey testimony last week and what he makes of all that. All right, James Comey testifying before Congress, the former FBI director tweeting after it was all over. Today wasn't a search for truth, but a desperate attempt to find anything that can be used to attack the institutions of justice investigating this president. Of course, the president responded over the weekend. Leaking James Comey must have set a record for who lied the most to Congress in one day. His Friday testimony was so untruthful. This whole deal's a rigged fraud headed up by dishonest people who would do anything so I could not become president. They're now exposed. We're talking to Joe diGenova, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia and a legal analyst for us here. Joe, what do you make of what James Comey said Friday, the full transcript now out?
Well, I think his breezy and convenient forgetfulness were an insult to the committee, and I think he committed perjury. I don't think there's any doubt that he feigned forgetfulness. He remembered all that stuff. The notion that he didn't know that Christopher Steele was the author of the dossier, and he forgot so much about this headquarter-driven investigation. Let's remember this investigation was run out of his office with McCabe and Strzok on the 7th floor. This was not a field office investigation. So his claims that he doesn't remember these things are just ludicrous. By the way, I do expect Comey to be indicted for the leaking of the information to the New York Times. The department may actually take a look at this testimony as well, assuming they get a referral from the feckless members of the committee. I just want to say one thing for the record. I think it's an embarrassment that Paul Ryan and McCarthy prevented the issuance of subpoena until this very late date, so that they, in essence, had to try and squeeze everything in at the last minute. And it's a shame that Goodlatte didn't publicly announce that he was being prevented from issuing subpoenas, which is in fact the case. So shame on Paul Ryan and shame on Kevin McCarthy.
So the leadership was preventing Goodlatte, because when we've talked to you previously on this here, you were very upset with Bob Goodlatte himself. You now have, is this new knowledge that you're saying that Goodlatte was being prevented from issuing the subpoenas?
Let me tell you something. Goodlatte should have stood up and given a speech or held a news conference saying, I want to issue subpoenas, but I can't. He never did that. He was complicit in this. I am not excusing Goodlatte. He's an embarrassment. He's just a wuss. And Ryan and McCarthy are responsible for these late subpoenas, and shame on them as well.
You know, Joe, I think somebody actually counted up, and it was 245 times
that
Comey said, I don't remember, I don't recall. I was actually thinking he needs to go see a doctor to see if there's something wrong with it.
Haldeman and Ehrlichman were convicted for saying, I can't recall, I don't remember, to a federal grand jury.
Right.
Comey lied through his teeth the other day. He remembered all of this stuff. Remember, this is the smartest guy in the room, the copious, surreptitious note-taker who remembers everything, forgets nothing, as long as it helps him.
You know, he did say a few things that were on the record that were of interest. One of the things he said was that the FBI probe into all of this initially began as a focus on 4 Americans. And that flies in the face of this notion that George Papadopoulos was the centerpiece of the investigation that launched it in the first place, the single person. So what are we to draw from that?
Well, it was a lie. Comey lied again. I don't know who the 4th person was. I know we've got Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, General Flynn. Who was the 4th? Do you know, Hans?
No, I'm not sure who he was talking about.
Yeah,
but then
he said 4 Americans. I couldn't figure out who the 4th American was. Of course, it's probably Trump.
Yeah, good point. And then you get this. He also said that the dossier, the Christopher Steele author that he said he didn't know if he knew him or whatever. He says the dossier was unverified both before and after the FBI had used it to obtain those FISA warrants, which begs the question, of course, why include the dossier if you haven't even verified it after the FISA?
Well, remember, also McCabe testified that without the dossier there is no warrant. You can't get a warrant. So what you then have is Comey saying it was never verified, but it was in fact used to get that it was the basis for in fact getting FISA warrants against Carter Page. Now, Huber is supposed to be investigating all this, and I have no idea whether he is or not. We've seen nothing to indicate that anything has happened in that regard. If that is not investigated and charged, and this nonsense about the Office of Inspector General, he doesn't run the damn department. He's not supposed to prevent investigations and prosecutions. If this is all being held up because of the IG report on this, then that means that this is all an effort to prevent holding accountable criminally people like Comey and Page and Strzok and McCabe and Baker and all of these people 26 people who've resigned or stepped aside. Bruce Orr, the unmasking, Samantha Power. Who's working on all this stuff? I mean, the unmasking of General Flynn. Victoria Tunting, my wife, has a great article today on FoxNews.com about General Flynn. You know what? The General Flynn case began with a crime, but it wasn't committed by General Flynn. It was committed by the United States government and Sally Yates for unmasking. Why hasn't that been investigated? Where are the indictments about the unmasking and the illegal felonious leaks to the Washington Post, to the leaks to David Ignatius? All of those are felonies. Who's investigating them? I mean, where's Superman, Rod Rosenstein? Never a word from him or anybody in the department about these violations of federal law. No wonder the president's furious. He should be.
Yeah, and Joe, I got to say that out of all of this, the worst thing in the world is the unmasking, because what that means is that the counterintelligence capabilities of the U.S. were used for partisan political reasons to target the presidential campaign of the opposing political candidate of who was in the White House. That is one of that we've never seen that kind of an abuse of our intelligence capabilities.
Hans, you're absolutely right. This is the greatest political crime in the history of the country. They weaponized the intelligence system. John Brennan, James Clapper, Sally Yates, they all were in on this. They weaponized the intelligence. They got 702 identifying information of American citizens illegally. The FISA court, by the way, wrote an opinion where they said that contractors for the FBI got access to the identity information of American citizens illegally, and nobody has paid attention to the FISA court. It's a stunning decision by the court accusing everybody of illegality. By the way, the head of the National Security Division at the time, John Carlin, resigned immediately before the court issued its opinion because he was the person who certified that all of these unmaskings were done legally, when in fact they were not. Now, where's the investigation of John Carlin and Sally Yates?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Stormy Daniels is treated as the most important issue ahead of us. All right. Thank you. Joe diGenova, thanks as always. We'll chat with you again soon. 724 WMAL.